it's about the roots of the ground team, forever proud.
Hello and welcome back to Paranormal NL Podcast. That's PNL Podcast for short. I'm your host and founder, located in Newfoundland and Labrador, Jen Noseworthy. Thank you for tuning in to UPRN, United Public Radio Network, UPRNTalkRadio.com, 107.7 FM in New Orleans, and 105.3 FM on that Gulf. Watch and listen to PNL Podcast every Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern on UPRN with a YouTube live chat watch party with me, your host, Jen Noseworthy, and a few BOG team members. Now, for tonight's Paranormal Apocalypse episode on UPRN segment number 79, I've got a special guest waiting backstage from Florida and two co-host guests from Texas and North Carolina, who I'll bring on shortly. Now, it's time to grab your favorite apocalyptic drink, a few esoteric monster munchies, and get ready for the show tonight. Paranormal NL Podcast is sponsored by the BOG team. It's a boots-on-ground team doing historical paranormal investigations in Newfoundland, Canada. Now, if you find yourself coming back to the show and you like the content, then smash that subscribe button. Gratitude. It all helps. Grab your PNL Podcast and the BOG team merch at TeePublic on our Linktree Paranormal NL Podcast. All BOG team music heard in the intro and the exit is available for download and use in all social media and streaming music platforms. PNL Podcast believes in supporting international paranormal networking and highlighting global paranormal people, places, and things. Now let's get on with the show, but first let's give a shout out to who introduced me to tonight's guest, and that would be Mr. Mark Eddy from Third Eye Live Podcast. Got to give a shout out to Sir Bryan Bowden too from Third Eye Live, and they're both PNL Podcast Alumni-Network members. Now, they were both previously on Season 2 and Season 3. Check them all out. You're going to love their content. Now, let's go ahead and bring on the stage with me all the way from Florida. We're going to bring our guest on first. We've got Mr. Maxim Furek. Welcome, Max. We've got co-host author Rob Shelsky all the way from North Carolina. And we've got Dr. Judd Burton. Welcome from Texas.
All right.
Welcome, everybody.
Thank you.
And Rob, you can unmute there.
Sorry about that.
Oh, that's okay. So shall we introduce the co-host first, and then we'll introduce the guest? Who wants to go first, Rob or Dr. Burton?
Well, I'm a UFO investigator, also of the paranormal in general. I've had about 20 years experience in it now. I have been a MUFON investigator for 3 years. I no longer am. I have been invited to the Library of Congress to give a speech on UFOs at the Mary Pickford Theater in the past. And I also was an on-camera expert for a UFO show they're planning for the Travel Channel through Cargo 7 Studios in LA.
Welcome,
and
Rob.
I write a lot of books. Thank you.
Yes, you can find Rob's work. He's a PNL Podcast Alumni-Network member, and he's been in on Season 3 and Season 4. And Dr. Burton, yes, come on in. You've been here since Season 1. Yeah, the long haul. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Dr. Burton.
Sure. Well, I'm a historian and anthropologist by training. I'm the director and senior fellow at the Institute of Biblical Anthropology. I've had a lifelong interest in the history of the strange and the paranormal, and both under the auspices of history and anthropology. I've taught courses in both of those fields, and the author of a number of books on what might be dubbed the biblical or the Christian strange, the Christian fringe. Yeah, I'm happy to be back. Certainly a Paranormal Newfoundland alum, and looking forward to the discussion this evening.
And you're joining us, by the looks of it, from your Texas UFO spacecraft.
my own personal spacecraft. Yes, that's correct.
Oh, that's cool.
Hey, Maxim. Welcome. Now, I was introduced to you through, like I said, Third Eye Live with Mark Eddy and Bryan Bowden. And tell us a little bit about yourself to the listeners listening across the world about Maxim Furek.
Yeah. Well, first of all, Mark Eddy is kind of like my quasi-manager because he's introduced me to everybody. So, Mark, if you're listening there from West Virginia, here's a shout out to you. Thank you for everything you've done. But
He's a great publicist. Maxim, before you continue, I have to give a shout out to my cat throwing stuff on the floor in the background. I'm so sorry, everybody. Go ahead, Maxim.
Well, that's adding to the whole ambiance. So,
that's right.
What's your cat's name?
It's a rescue kitty. Her name is Tuna.
I like that. Okay, Tuna.
She's very intelligent.
Okay. I am a former rock journalist. I used to write about rock and roll, and I would look at it through a sociological lens, maybe trying to give it more validity. Trying to encourage people to look at rock music as a serious form of communication. But about 10 years ago, I had a book published called the Shepton Mythology, and it was a coal mining disaster in northeastern Pennsylvania, which had some very strange paranormal elements. It had aspects of out-of-body experiences, of after-death experiences, and near-death experiences. So that book started to open up the doors to the realm of the paranormal, and I started to write books. I started to get into that aspect. I've written books about flying saucers, i.e. flying saucer esoteric, Bigfoot, the Lost Tribes of Bigfoot. My big seller is Coal Region Hoodoo, Paranormal Tales from Inside the Pit, which takes a look at northeastern Pennsylvania as well as western Pennsylvania and looking at some of the aspects of the paranormal. And what I guess I bring to the table is, I consider myself a skeptic. I consider myself, I enjoy writing, but I like doing the research and trying to get it right. And so I do that. But, as far as my real credentials, I'm a Vietnam veteran. I served during Nam. I was aboard the USS Constellation. And
thank you for your service, Maxim.
Thank you. Yeah, they're big on that down here in Florida. They say that a lot. So, aboard the Constellation, I was a radarman, and I saw UFOs. Now, by that, you would look at a radar scope, and you see these contacts, and you can tell that they're solid, tangible contacts. They're bogies. And the ones we saw were faster and more maneuverable than any guided missile that we had or the Soviets at the time had. They weren't hallucinations. They weren't reflections from Venus. They weren't, marsh gas. They weren't garbage, sea return, what we'd call. They were solid. So I would look through the logbooks during my time off and take a look at, and they had numerous UFO sightings. I wasn't the only radarman who saw those. Most of us guys were under the age of 20 years old. We were just little kids fighting this war. But they told us this. They said, keep your mouth shut. Don't tell anybody what you saw, with the UFOs. And so I remember years later, I go to my Navy reunions, and we would talk about this, and the guys would say yes. And not just on the Constellation in the Navy, but other branches of the military saw similar things. So whatever that represents, it seems to me that maybe 3% of what we see that's out there may be anomalous, 3%. So, it may be 4, it may be 2, but 3% was pretty much the given number that they couldn't explain what they were.
I'd like to talk a little bit about more of that, Maxim. Rob, do you have any questions about that? I'm sure you do. I can tell by your face from a former MUFON investigator.
Yeah, you're like me, Maxim. I think you want to kick the tires of UFOs to see if they're real. I'm kind of a hard kind of researcher too. I want facts. I'm skeptical, but I have to say I'm convinced these things exist. Are you convinced these things exist?
Yeah, but again, I look at UFOs or flying saucers. I still call them flying saucers. I look at them as being similar to Bigfoot. I think that there's some sort of an interdimensional pathway, that maybe the saucers as well as these Sasquatch, these cryptids, somehow ship shape between dimensions, and just in simplistic terms, it was Einstein and Rosen's bridge theory or wormhole theory. And Jacques Vallée was one of the first people that I knew of that introduced me to that concept. But with flying saucers, the theory was that, and Jacques Vallée would say that it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to look at extraterrestrial travel. Like when you think about just how time consuming and energy consuming and just everything. I mean, it's just mind boggling to think that the Space Brothers could travel trillions of light years from wherever to get to Earth. And it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It's almost like archaic thinking. But Jacques Vallée was saying that, well, there may be an interdimensional pathway, a great theory. We know it hasn't been proven yet, but that makes more sense than anything else that I've seen. And as Dr. Judd and Rob, I think you guys know that with the scientific method, we look at theories, we try to replicate those, duplicate those, we look at them and we look for the theory that makes the most sense. And for me right now, with both cryptids being flesh and blood or with saucers being nuts and bolts, I'm just thinking that the extraterrestrial hypotheses makes more sense to me. So, whatever, you want to do with it, I think that's what's keeps me excited. So yeah, I think that they do exist, but in another element, another realm.
I found
Maxim,
it intriguing. Sorry, go ahead, Dr. Burton.
I was just going to say, Maxim, I think you're right. I teach a round of courses called Preternatural Morphology. It's sort of popularly become a Monsters 101 program, but I dubbed it Preternatural because these entities seem to have both physical and spiritual or quantum qualities. I'll give you a little anecdote from personal experience. When I was going through my graduate program in anthropology, I believed in Sasquatch, and in fact, I was kind of a student of the Grover Krantz school of Bigfoot until I started hearing reports and reading reports about these creatures, seemingly appearing out of nowhere and being accompanied by Fortean phenomena and anomalies of all kinds. And then my thinking started to shift a little bit, and to where I'm at the point that I am now, that the transdimensionality seems to be it's the golden mean. I think when you assess all of the data points, I think there's room for the supernatural explanation, and I think there's room for the physical explanation. I think they occupy the same space, and we're in as we've entered into the quantum age. We're just sort of getting the language, to describe these kinds of occurrences, and so it's something that I encourage my students to try and do, is to believe in and grasp at the strange and the anomalous and the supernatural, but use reason and the scientific method to whittle down the most accurate picture that you can get of that. And I think the more that we can encourage everybody and anybody that's interested in becoming an investigator into this realm in its many facets, I think the better off we are.
Yeah, I agree with you. My theory is that everything is everything. When I wrote Co-Region Hoodoo, I tried to go and take the spiritual and the scientific and the paranormal to try to go and get those as close to the scientific model as I could. I had a friend back home. His name was Dr. Frederick Santee. Santee was a child prodigy. He was a white witch. He was the high priest for the Coven of the Kata, which was initiated by Sybil Leek, the world's most famous witch. But Dr. Santee told me that there was no difference between the scientific and the supernatural. And a good example of that is that when you look at the scientific realm, we have cause and effect. So with the ball dropping, we see the ball dropping. That's the effect. And the cause is, it's Newton's law of gravity. Gravity causes the thing to fall. But when you look at things like miracles, apparitions, orbs, cryptids, whatever that might be, whatever that paranormal thing might be, I believe that there may be some kind of a scientific explanation, but we have yet to find what that might be. So again, when I think that what we need to do is, as you folks have been saying, we need to be more scientifically minded. We have to do as much as we can as to follow that scientific model as far as finding evidence and proper documentation, and not the hysteria and the drama, but the being skeptical and just looking for the information and being patient.
Well, that's why I love, Maxim, that you mentioned that a lot of other servicemen have seen things.
Right.
But, a lot of them have been suppressed because they're not allowed to talk about it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But a lot of people have observed strange things. And, of course, some people think, oh, it's our own technology. What do you guys think about that?
I don't think it is. I do have one point that I'd like to make. You were talking about the Einstein-Rosen bridge, which basically constitutes a wormhole.
Yeah.
First of all, you'd have to have negative energy to create those, and you'd have to have an enormous amount of energy equivalent to something the size of our sun. But if we could make them, or if someone else has, you could just as easily travel across the galaxies as you could from one dimension to another. In fact,
what about CERN, Rob? Wouldn't that be enough energy?
No, nowhere near. Maybe on a molecular, an atomic, subatomic scale, yes. You might create a wormhole, but it would be microscopic, less than microscopic. It wouldn't be hard. And another thing that I don't discount the supernatural at all. In fact, I'm rather in favor of believing it does exist and it may be an extension of our reality. But Maxim talks about doing it scientifically. How do you do something that just isn't repeatable? And one of the main things about the scientific method is that other people have to be able to repeat the experiment in order to prove the validity of the experiment, even with quantum theory.
Yeah. Well, when you look at something like, say, Sasquatch, first of all, look at some of the evidence. Now, again, we don't have a body, we don't have any DNA, but we have our multiple witnesses. We have witnesses that tend to have that same offensive fecal matter, rotten egg, wet dog smell that associated with Bigfoot. The sounds, the wood knocks, the rocks, the wood structures, all of that. I think maybe one of those or two of those things might be a coincidence, but when you start seeing 3 or 4, it's more like Jacques Vallée's elements of high strangeness. You start to get a pile of high strangeness that I think in itself is some kind of evidence. Now, what that is, circumstantial. I don't care what you want to call it,
circumstantial.
but it's something that you can't ignore because there's too much of it. Again, we don't have the flesh and blood evidence that the scientific community wants. We don't have the DNA or the body that we all want. All we have is a lot of, we have witnesses. We have the foot cast, which are pretty impressive, bigger than bear, bigger than man, wider strides. Jeff Meldrum, who just passed away in 2025, had one of the biggest collections of that. So, you can't discount that. You can't deny that. And Dr. Judd was talking about Krantz, who was the first that talked about, who started to call these creatures Sasquatch, the old coastal people's name, for thousands of years. So there's things there that we really have to take a look at and try.
Maxim, you're talking about the biological, right? But there's also the woo aspect of it. When I think of Bigfoot, there's some theories that maybe they are from a different dimension. Maybe our eyes can't see them because they're cloaked somehow. What do you think about those theories?
Well, if I may, and I don't want to go and be the one to suck the air out of the room. So please, guys, if you have something to say, just say it, or cut me off or whatever. Mute my mic if you need to. But there's a lot of Bigfoot hunters in Western Pennsylvania. The Chestnut Ridge area, and Pennsylvania allegedly is the number 3 state with Bigfoot sightings after Washington and California state. And if that's true, according to the Travel Channel and a whole bunch of other things. But there's a whole lot of Bigfoot researchers out there, and I know a lot of them. And I remember not too long ago, they were very skeptical about guys like me that would talk about the scientific model and the interdimensional things. We were known as woo. And some of these guys called me Dr. Woo. Well, after a while, they started to come around and say, wait a second, it could be that they may be interdimensional. But some of these guys were saying that they may have that flesh and blood thing. They may have physical abilities as well as interdimensional. So again, they're covering all bases, but none of us know. We're just tracking down theories that are plausible, that probably can't be replicated as the scientific community is demanding. And that seems to be the problem. We're looking for proof that I can hold in my hand and give to you, that you would take a look at and come to the same conclusions. And a good example is this: when we went up to the moon, and when was it, 1969, came down with moon rocks, we broke them up and we started to give them to scientists around the world so they too could analyze these things and say, yes, these fragments of rock contain mercury, arsenic, whatever the compounds are, so that we could be on the same base. And that's the scientific method, where we share the information, and which we need to do. So it worked with the moon rocks, but it hasn't been working so well with some of these themes that are more of the paranormal. So
right, yeah, there's a lot of people who don't believe in the woo. They just want to see the pure science of it. There's an example going around of this doll here, Annabelle, blaming Annabelle for doing different things at different places that they brought her. It does make you wonder, but I don't know about that.
Yeah. You just brought up that picture of Annabelle and myself and Dan Rivera. I don't know if you could go and flash back on that. But,
sure, yeah.
But with my book, The Schmerl Haunting,
Yes.
Schmerl Haunting took place in West Pittston, Pennsylvania back in the 80s. So that was in my backyard. And in the introduction to the book, The Schmerl Haunting, I claimed that there was something that channeled through me to motivate me to write the book. And I mean, it sounds a little bit over the top. It sounds like overtly dramatic, but it really was what happened. In 1988, Ed and Lorraine Warren, the Roman Catholic demonologist, announced that they would be embarking on a 15-city tour promoting the book The Haunted, which was about the Schmerl Haunting. That was 1988. So I went out there and I met them, and I took photographs. They befriended me. I mean, they walked me through a lot of this paranormal stuff. They taught me a lot about the Schmerl Haunting. But then in July 11th, 2025, I went to Gettysburg to see Annabelle, and I met Dan Rivera. And 2 days later, Dan Rivera died. We had agreed to do an interview on Monday the 14th, and I got a call from somebody that said that he had died. He died.
Rest in peace, Dan. That's horrible.
Yeah, he died a day before. Yeah, correct. So anyway, what was happening with that? How did he die? Well, the coroner said that he died of a heart attack, that he had a history of cardiac issues. And that's unfortunate. But other people were saying, like the Psychic Vincent sisters were saying, no, Annabelle is filled with demonic energies. And what happened was Annabelle wore down Dan Rivera, and over time, he succumbed to her demonic forces. Now, again, it's nothing that we can prove. All we know is that he died, and all we know is that the Devils on the Run tour of 2025 that went to New Orleans and went to San Antonio and went to the West Virginia Penitentiary and went to Gettysburg, made roughly $50,000 per gig, took in roughly $200,000 for the four dates by taking Annabelle around on the road, something that Lorraine Warren said shouldn't have happened. Lorraine wanted Annabelle to stay in the Warren Occult Museum in Monroe, Connecticut. So again, there's a lot of conjecture, and there's a lot of varied opinions, but the thing of it is that Annabelle was taken around, and money was made, and unfortunately Dan Rivera died. So
Now, Dr. Burton, you've done some exorcisms. So what is your theory on the Smurl hunting and Annabelle?
I don't think there can be any doubt that that the doll in question did contain demonic energy. Ed and Lorraine Warren, who are arguably amongst the most famous demonologists in the history of the field, certainly documented enough, I suppose, what you would call ethnographic data that would demonstrate that was the case. And certainly there's a precedent in world history for items, fetishes and totems and things like that that contain this sort of energy. And you just, Lorraine was right. I don't think that it should have been moved around in the manner that it was, and it's sort of paraded in circus fashion.
Dr. Burton, do you think that, you talk in your books about the giants and things like that. Do you think that they're still around, their spirit, shall we say, and got into different stuff and are still causing havoc?
Yeah, I certainly tend to, simply because of the language that's being used in the description of demons. So much of it matches up with Jewish apocryphal literature, like the Book of Enoch, and phrases and words that are used in the New Testament, like unclean spirit and an evil spirit, is the same kind of phraseology that you find in earlier Judaic conceptions of demons. And the fact of the matter is that by the time you get to the Second Temple period, that world, the people that occupy that world, believe that the spirits of these gigantic hybrid offspring of fallen angels and humans became part of a demonic host. And so, yeah, I, looking at it through the lens of Judeo-Christian tradition and the biblical tradition, I would say that, yeah, they're still very much active in the world. I get asked the question sometimes in podcasts and interviews about giants is, well, what happened to the giants? My answer is that they never really left. They shed their physical forms, but they're still around. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if this is the culprit that we're looking at in the case of Annabelle.
Wow.
That's scary stuff. What do you think, Rob?
I'm afraid I have to politely disagree.
Okay, it's good. I love to have a good debate. Tell us your theory.
That's fair.
Yeah.
I just I see no evidence to support a lot of these contentions. A lot of them are personal beliefs that are being stated by both parties, and I state them myself, so I'm just as guilty of it. But I don't see any real evidence to support the idea of demons. I mean, if you have demons, you have hell. If you have hell, you have heaven. If you have heaven, you have angels. If you have angels, you have all the stuff that goes with it. That's very Christian, or perhaps even Jewish in origin. But it certainly isn't the only religion on the planet, and many of them don't see that at all. The man had a history of heart disease, and he died of a heart attack. That is enough for me. I mean, it may be connected with Annabelle, but I see no proof whatsoever to support that idea. It's just a contention. In history, we've done that all the time. People had superstitions about not walking under a ladder, not letting a black cat cross their path, because something happened one time when they did, and so that became a maxim. No offense to you, Maxim, but I mean, it doesn't make it so. It doesn't make it so if I knock on a tree that I'm actually raising tree spirits. I personally do knock on wood, so maybe I do believe that. But beliefs and facts are two different things for me, and I don't see how far we're going to get if we don't approach this in a more scientific method, a repeatable method. If there is such a thing as demons, then we need to research it in a scientific manner. And if you say, well, it's outside the realm of science, well, then so are, people's personal dreams Or believing in fairies or gnomes.
Paranormal items completely unobtainable, shall we say? Isn't that why we call it paranormal? Because it's unexplained, because it's supernatural.
Well,
the
because
Bible is supernatural.
Paranormal means it's outside what we consider to be normal. It may be perfectly normal. It may be a part of our reality. We just haven't discovered it yet,
Right.
or found proof enough of it yet. And scientists are really loath to go out on a limb for anything, including UFOs. But I know I've been there and dealt with them, and I'm one of them basically. But I don't know at what point you're crossing over from the paranormal into sheer superstition. And that's what worries me. We have to keep some kind of rational train of thought on these things, I think. We can't just start accepting everything as real and possible. I mean, you have to focus on different aspects of it and try to come to conclusions, like orbs. What are orbs? Well, we can investigate them. People see them, people photograph them. So maybe we can start with what we can get our hands on, and then from there we can move to what we can't right now get our hands on.
Mm-hmm. I think it gets difficult because we're so close to this. We a lot of the things that we get from the Jewish religion, a lot of things that we get from Greek mythology, and so that makes it a little bit difficult because we're so close to it. But if we could look at this maybe mathematically, in a sense, and I kind of like this concept. But I talked about the 3% of the things with flying saucers, UFOs, UAPs, that 3% of what we see are anomalous. We just can't explain what they are. They're not weather anomalies. They're something else. And the same thing with demonology or people that are possessed. According to Father Amorth, who was the Vatican's chief exorcist, there was a movie called The Pope's Exorcist with Russell Crowe. That it was a pretty accurate representation of exorcism. But Father Amorth said that only 2% of the people that the Catholic Church deal with are actually possessed by demons. The rest of them it's a mental illness. It's either schizophrenia or Tourette's syndrome or bipolar illness. But when you look at somebody who is actually possessed, you have a collection of things, of behaviors. For example, superhuman strength. You have these individuals, they have the ability to speak languages that they do not have any way of knowing. I mean, they can articulate this very well. They know, people in the room, they know their secrets, their deep, dark secrets, and they say that. They can levitate, the superhuman strength, just a lot of things like that. And it seems to be part and parcel of this realm of demonic possession. And again,
but why was that never filmed? I mean, we have movies that are fiction about it.
Yeah.
But why if in all these possessions, none of this was ever really filmed? The only actual possessions I saw in film show people who could be suffering from severe bipolar schizophrenia. Yeah. And all sorts of mental illnesses. And another thing, maybe what's called being possessed is just another form of undiagnosed disease. There's a lot of them out there still. But I mean,
what about different things like the Shadow Man and stuff like that, or the Big D? What do you think about those, Rob?
Well, we do get film of the shadow people. Go on YouTube. Go on Slap Tam. You'll see it all over the place.
But don't they say a lot of those take over people?
They say yes, but they also say that fairies are in my bottom garden. I mean, is it so, or is it just them saying it? I need more proof. Mm-hmm. I do believe some of this stuff is quite real. I can't help being a believer to some degree, but I need more actual proof of it. Mm-hmm. I mean, if only 2 or 3% are actual demons, and they could be. I'm not saying they're not. Yeah. But why isn't there any film of them actually levitating? Why isn't there any film of them speaking in a foreign language that anyone can understand? Certain churches have people speaking in tongues, and linguists have gone in there and observed it and said, those are not tongues. They're just gibberish.
Yeah. I've seen it happen on Spirit Talker.
I could just submit that if these demons or these people possessed by demons do possess superhuman strength and maybe abilities, I would think one of them would be able to perceive the fact that somebody had a camera there and is trying to film them. And I certainly wouldn't act out for the camera. I would just play my games and do what I need to do. So none of this is easy.
Well, some of the things that come through on Spirit Box is so highly intelligent. And not only that, but precognitional, and will tell you something that will happen a couple minutes before. And then the exact same thing happens.
Yeah.
That is scary.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's other electronic devices with regard to spirits and ghosts, and they do seem to function. I have one too. I have one here at the house, and I've used it. And but I just can't. I mean, you can have an open mind, but if it's so open that it possesses everything and incorporates everything into one's reality, how do you know what's true and what isn't? You're right back where our ancestors were, where all life was superstition. He mentioned Greek mythology. It was mythology. That's my point. It wasn't real.
Mm-hmm.
It was considered
Dr.
to be
Burton, do you want to speak to that?
To mythology as evidence? Well, I think that there was a time in our history, in fact, the further back you go into antiquity and prehistory, we live in an age of intellectual compartmentalization where it's sort of a residue of the Enlightenment movement, where we have all of our fields that are separated, so history and economics and philosophy and mathematics and physics. Well, the farther back you go in time, the less people thought that way, and particularly when you get to antiquity and especially in prehistory, you're looking at a mindset, as best we can discern from the archaeological record, that didn't separate something like mythology and history the way that we do
some
today.
Things found from the words of the Bible and stuff based on those words?
Say that again?
Weren't some of the items in the Bible, like some of the words, they used that as a location and actually found the items or the location?
Well, in the Bible, but in the larger Eastern Mediterranean world, I think you may be thinking about things like the Iliad and the Odyssey, and so that for the longest time we thought that the Trojan War was something that Homer created until Frank Calvert and to a degree Heinrich Schliemann worked on the hill of Hissarlik and began the discovery process of finding out that the Trojan War between the Mycenaean Greeks and the Trojans in Western Asia Minor actually did happen. We later found Hittite records that even reference some of the names. And so even in ancient times when, let's say, that writing was available, mythology and history often rode the same kind of cart. But especially in the farther back you go, this is something that anthropologists talk about when they study, people living in a Stone Age or non-literate, non-industrial kind of life way in the modern world. They don't intellectually compartmentalize their what we would call fields of study. They all work together in the same kind of cultural toolkit, only separated by a kind of porous membrane, so that language and history and math and engineering and economics and all of the equivalents of that in those societies work together in some regard and have quite a bit of overlap. And I would say that in general, that's true of mythology and history and antiquity, and especially the farther back into prehistory you go. And so I think one of the things that we've been hitting on today is what kind of evidences are we willing to weigh. I think we need to, certainly the quantitative is important. I understand that as an archaeologist, but the qualitative is equally as important. The ethnographic, particularly as it compounds and mounts, as Maxim pointed out, this should all be taken in concert.
I think when we're looking for hard evidence, I think some of the best evidence we have as far as, say, Bigfoot and UFOs would be the 1967 Patterson-Gimlin film.
Yes.
That seems to be the gold standard, 58 seconds of film that they never thought they captured. And even today, I mean, that seems to be the gold standard. That, I mean, people that look at it, Jeff Meldrum and everybody else, believe that it was an actual creature. Looking at the gait, the size, not a man in a monkey suit. And on the other side, if you look at the Nimitz film of 2004, where they had the Tic Tac video, and this is the time. This was Navy fighter pilots that shot this thing that zigzagged, went under the water, and the Pentagon changed it from UFOs to unidentified aerial phenomenon, and then unidentified anomalous phenomenon when it went underwater. But that 1967 and 2004, those videos are pretty much the best thing that we have as far as evidence. Now, again, it fits into that, maybe that 3%. We can't figure out what exactly this is. It's just too good. The thing about Patterson-Gimlin, I remember there was the paleontologist, and I'm sure Dr. Burton knows about this, and probably you too, Rob. But John Napier was in charge of the Smithsonian, and he had a chance to take a look at the Patterson-Gimlin film, and he had some of his colleagues there. A number of them were Russian, and Napier believed that it was a fake because the top of the Patterson-Gimlin patty, the ape, was ape-like with long sinewy arms, and the bottom was a hominid, walking like a human. So he thought that Patterson-Gimlin just cobbled two elements together. That was fine. A couple of years later in Ethiopia, they discovered Lucy. And Lucy was one of the oldest relatives of man. It was Australopithecus, maybe I think 3.5 or 4.5 feet tall, named after the Beatles, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. But Lucy had an upper body like an ape and had the bottom like a human being. Was a hominid. And when Napier saw that, he said, wait, I've been wrong. Here was an example of science coming together with bringing enough evidence to the table that at least changed the mind of this great, scientist who
and
said
Maxim, the Smithsonian got everything, don't they? They stole it all.
Yes, they do. Yeah. So anyway, that was one of my favorite stories, because here's an example really of maybe paranormal folks or Bigfoot folks working with, or the scientific community, I say, working with us and giving us the information.
Instead of storming Area 51, we should go storm the Smithsonian.
Yeah.
Have you been there?
I haven't. Have you?
Yes. You know what surprised me? It's not just one museum. It's a whole bunch of museums in a row.
Is it?
Yeah, there's an aerospace one. There's like a museum of natural history. There's a like pop culture museum. I mean, and Native American museum. I mean, it's incredible. You can't see it all in one day.
The amount of stuff they have in there must be mind-boggling, right?
Oh, it's incredible. It's incredible. And it's quite fascinating.
Yeah.
By the way, I don't discount Bigfoot or UFOs. In fact, I believe UFOs exist. And I believe Bigfoot or something like it exists. But what we're seeing is evidence of something. But there's more than one explanation possible for it. For instance, it could be interdimensional. Yeah. Sometimes they've been spotted along with UFOs nearby. Right. So are they extraterrestrial? And even though we have this evidence and we're accumulating it, the problem is we haven't come to any concrete conclusions. Mm-hmm. Beliefs, yes, but not concrete conclusions. That's what I want. I want answers. And my way of going about getting it is through the scientific method and basically kicking the tires.
Yeah. And what do you think about some of these things that people say that, okay, we've got so much junk all over the world with uranium and all this contamination everywhere. Do you think that we have altered some of the gene DNA of some of these animals and got really strange things running around?
It would take countless generations, and some 99% of mutations are usually lethal or counterproductive to the survival of the species. So I would say that probably isn't the cause unless it's been really long-term radiation exposure, like millions of years.
We've got a lot of weird animals nowadays. It seems like there's more and more albino animals. Have you noticed that? Mm-hmm. Popping up everywhere?
Yeah, a lot of albino buffaloes.
Yes, we've got an albino moose here in Newfoundland and all kinds of other albino birds and all kinds of other animals.
Yeah, one thing of interest that happened at the beginning of 2025 was, I think it was in Antarctica, and there was this gigantic glacier that was calving. It was as big as Chicago, something like 11 miles by 9 miles, but there were oceanographers that were about an hour away. So they went over there, they dropped their submersible little whatever with the cameras, and they were able to go down and look at what was underneath this glacier that had been under that glacier for maybe hundreds or thousands of millions of years. I don't know what, but they saw.
How cool is that?
Very. And they saw these jellyfish, they saw these life forms that were larger than you would normally find. But first of all, they were larger than normal. They were actually living. And the other thing, and this is pretty interesting.
A whole different ecosphere and biosystem down there.
Exactly. They don't know how they were able to exist. Like if there was a stream of plankton or light or whatever coming down there, keeping them alive, or if there was another life force. And again, I haven't heard part 2 of this, but I mean, part 1 was pretty amazing.
Just like the ones over by the volcano and really deep under the ocean. And then Rob got this ecosphere in his backyard. Do you want to talk about that?
I have one in my front yard. My little reflection pond I just found 5 different species of frogs in it.
Wow.
Did you really?
And in the backyard, your little stylized picture there, that is my backyard. Okay. Only you'd have to put in about 4 times as many cats into that picture.
This is a tube that the cats run around the backyard in.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
Sorry,
well, it's great if you don't have cats.
That's Rob's UFO alien cats. Yeah.
Oh, I have a question for Dr. Burton, if I may. Dr.
Sure.
Burton, you believe that demons exist, right? Or possessions by demons exist?
Dr. Burton? Are you still here with us?
I'm here. Yeah, I dropped out for a second. If you would repeat that, Maxim, please.
Oh, actually, it was me, Rob. But
oh, Rob. Yes, I'm sorry.
That's quite all right. You believe that some possessions are really made by demons, correct?
I do believe that. Yeah, there are demons.
Okay, then the next part of my question is, if there are demons, then they are like pure evil, aren't they?
Amongst other things, yes.
So you believe that evil, pure evil, real evil, not just people being bad, exists in the world?
Can you hear the question?
Dropped out again. I heard and answered the first part, but the second part, Rob, if you'd be so kind as to repeat.
Sure,
He's in his galactic ship and having some technical difficulties.
It needs some maintenance, apparently.
The second part was, so if demons exist and they are basically pure evil, do you believe that pure evil does exist in our world?
I do.
Okay, do you believe the opposite, that there's pure good in our world as well?
Yes.
Okay, that makes me feel better. No, I just wondered, because if there is possession, then there are demons. If there are demons, there is evil. Evil must exist in our world. And so for me,
it's kind of. I'm glad that you're reassured of that. It's kind of a mathematics of balance, where you have good on one side of the equation and evil on the other side of the equation. I'm a firm believer that perhaps it's a nonlinear equation, and that the good side is more powerful. I think we would all like to believe that. I do.
Yeah.
I have to believe it. I mean, you kind of have to at the end of the day. If you're a moral, ethical person, I think you kind of have to.
But have you noticed lately that there's more unrest in the world and more people who are exhibiting evil tendencies, or anger seems to be boiling up?
Yes, I mean, we're just, I mean, in the West in general, we're probably as polarized as we ever have been. People tend to get easily polarized over, and again, I don't want to venture into the political or anything like that. I'm just pointing out a cultural, social reality is that we're polarized over many issues, and that creates a kind of dialectic tension in society. And of course, we've never escaped the specter of war, which is something that is again rampant in the world today. So, I mean, it does seem dire. You know, Art Bell used to talk about something called the quickening on the old when he was the host of Coast to Coast. And again, you know, it's hard to quantify something like that, but in almost a gut feeling kind of way, when you read the room of the world, so to speak, you do sort of get that sense that evil is more widespread now. But I do think that there are agents of good that are stepping up to counterbalance that too.
Mm-hmm. I know when I would talk to Ed and Lorraine Warren, their mantra, you know, as Christians, as Catholics, always was that the power of the devil is great, but the power of God is greater. And when I went to see Annabelle there in Gettysburg, all of those guys there from the Northeastern New England Society for Psychic Research, you know, the people that brought Annabelle around, they were saying the same thing. They looked at things through a Christian perspective. And given that, I believe that the reason that the Schmerls, Jack and Janet Schmerl, were targeted was because that they were Christians. They were devout Catholics. And I think that they had a target on their back. I think that when the devil or the demon, whoever, you know, the unclean spirits want to bring down somebody who has given their life over to God. And I think they just score more points by bringing those people down. So I think it works like that. And with Rob's question about is there pure good or is there pure evil? I think that one problem with that is temptation, that the devil always tempts us, you know, with the pleasures of the flesh or materialism or whatever that is. And we're always being tempted, and we always have to be strong. And one thing, I mean, you do what you want to do, but even with the ghost hunters that go into a allegedly haunted house, I mean, they find a way to go and get centered, to be protected, whether it's with holy water or by saying St. Michael the Archangel's prayer of protection or whatever that is. But, you know, if you fill your head with God's grace, you know, I mean, I think at least with that, you can be a warrior. Ed Warren said that when he did battle with demonic forces, he would invoke the spirit of Jesus Christ, of St. Michael the Archangel, and of Padre Pio to do battle. And that was his method. But I think that if you're filled with maybe icons and relics and, you know, we were talking about items and fetishes and totems of evil. Well, the same thing with goodness. You know, I mean, we could go and wrap ourselves in, you know, these trappings of spirituality and religiosity, things that we believe in, that we could take as we do battle. And not only that, but whether you're going into a haunted house or whether you're going, you know, through life during a 24-hour period. I mean, I believe that, you know, I mean, I consider myself a spiritual person, and I do believe that there's demonic forces out there. And one other thing too, I mean, I've had people warn me about not getting too close. Don't get too close to the demonic, you know, they're going to suck you in. And I don't think I do. I mean, I look at this as a skeptic and as an academic. All I want to do is what everybody else is doing. I want to figure it out. I want to try to get as close to the truth as I can. And I'm fascinated by this, and I'll say this, I love cryptids and Bigfoot and flying saucers and all that, but it's the realm of demonology and Catholic mysticism that pushes my buttons, that just fills me with just a whole lot of excitement and passion.
And it's important what you talked about with protection too, I believe. So,
yes, but if everything can be imbued with evil or good, like a doll, objects, fetishes, trees, hillsides, that doesn't sound like any of the mainstream current religions to me at all. It sounds much more like paganism. And paganism firmly believes that sort of thing. And I have friends who are pagans in England,
Mhm.
and they place bouquets of flowers at the feet of certain hills because they're considered sacred, whereas others, like grottos, certain grottos are considered evil. But that, to me, I mean, that belief system goes back a long, long ways. Now, is that superstition? Were the
It's
pagans
interesting
just-
that you mentioned grotto, because I've had some really scary stuff happen at a local grotto.
See what I mean?
Well, I have friends that are pagans and they're Wiccans, and they'll do things like this. Like a lot of us will do a Ouija board, just as a parlor game.
Ooh, stay away from that.
Just saying,
Yeah, definitely.
But friends of mine that are Wiccans use the Ouija board to contact specific spirits to give them answers or to give them guidance. So they believe that they could tap into this through a Ouija board. Most of us don't do that or don't know how to do that. We're not at that level.
Well, that's why I said stay away. For people who don't know how to do it, don't do it unless you know what you're doing.
Right.
I did it once and threw the board away. There was 4 of us
Oh
doing it.
no! And did
The
you
experience
close
was
it
so
before
negative.
you threw it away?
Yeah, it just kept telling me to die. So I finally just picked the thing up. I just bought it.
Rob, you might have been with me when I was in college. I mean, we decided to a seance, and we thought we would have the devil show up just to give us an appearance, not to possess us, but it was really stupid and foolish. And it ended up like I was terrified. I mean, I never did that again. It was the dumbest thing I ever did in my life, but I was young, and stupid. And
have you ever used one before, Dr. Burton?
No. You begin to understand why the prescriptions against necromancy existed in something like Levitical law.
Is a Ouija board considered necromancy?
I think technically it is.
Really? Because I thought it was more like just a medium, contacting the dead spirits. Like a medium.
Well, I mean, essentially that is
Depends on what comes through the board, right, Maxim?
Yeah, essentially
I got
that
a
is.
bad one.
Yeah.
It sounds like it. Yeah, you did the right thing, Rob.
Thank you.
Okay, everybody, it's time for shout-outs. Who wants to go first? Maxim, let's do it. Where can people find your books and your stuff?
yeah, first of all, thank you so much for this really in-depth conversation, guys. I can't thank you enough. I think it's better to have a podcast with a co-host and somebody else. I mean, there's more balance, there's more opinions.
Right.
It's not just one person. And thank you for that. I mean, I really appreciate that.
I had fun.
You guys have a lot of skill and knowledge, and, good for you,
A lot of brain power on this channel here.
Yeah, great. Yeah, Jen, thanks so much for putting this together. But for the folks that are interested in any of my books or my background, I have a website. It's www.maximfurek.com.
I had the website on earlier when y'all were talking, and on the bottom of the screen down here, you can see everybody's
There's
links.
my website. So you could contact me if anybody wants a autographed copy of any of my books. Contact me. We could figure that out. I would say this: promote and support local podcasts, bookstores, libraries. I don't want to get political, but not Amazon. They're billionaires. They don't need your money, but we do. So support us. And also, if you do buy any of my books, please be so kind as to leave a review on Goodreads, Amazon, whatever. That's how Amazon helps us out. And we really need that. That's
good to know. A lot of people don't know that about authors and how they need the help like that for reviews.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Well, where can people find your work, Rob?
Well, they can, first of all, let me thank you too, because I really enjoyed this. It's lovely to get other people's opinions, and we're all opinionated, but it's great to hear other people's opinions. And I tend to incorporate some of what they believe into my own opinions. But you can get me on Amazon. You can get me at Permuted Press, Simon & Schuster. A number of publications, Barnes & Noble, places like that.
How about you, Dr. Burton? Where can people find your work?
Well, you can go to burtonbeyond.net and find links to books and courses and things of that nature. The Institute of Biblical Anthropology is also hosted there.
I think
I'm
are
on
you
Facebook.
exclusively on Lulu? Is that your publisher?
Right now I'm looking at moving that over to Amazon. But again, Jen, thanks for having all of us, and I'm glad that there's such a range of opinions and approaches here, because we really need them all. We really do. We need the qualitative and we need the quantitative. And I think we're all looking at the same kind of material. We're just bringing different methodological toolkits to the issues. And I think, as the Bible says, iron sharpens iron when it comes to that.
That's right. Thank you, everybody, so much for being on the show. Everybody listening, follow Maxim Furek, follow Rob Shelsky, follow Dr. Judd Burton. You're going to love all of their work and all of their books. They're amazing. Thank you so much for being on the show. And Maxim, you're now a PNL Podcast Alumni-Network member. You got access to everybody in season 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I'll get you hooked up with somebody when we're off air. All right, everybody. I'm going to leave y'all with some 80s Bog Team metal music.